Communication study session, and we're kicking off a lot of really great things today, and thank you to our presenters for being here today as well. I'll start with roll call, then we'll do the flag salute. Mrs. Cobian?
Present.
Mr. Peralta?
Present.
Rivas present. Mrs. Mendez-Garcia?
Present.
And Mr. Segrist is out today. Will you please join me in standing for the flag salute? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, it's time for public comments, and we don't have any cards. And Dr. Garcia, do we have any written communications?
No written communication has come forward.
Okay. Then we will kick off with our first item on the discussion session agenda. Strategic plan, we have Dr. Lovely here with us today, and really looking forward to the process that you're going to help guide our district through. So, Dr. Garcia, would you like more?
Absolutely. Good morning. Thank you, President Rivas, governing board members, and to our wonderful audience. Really excited for all of the conversations that we have ahead of us today. We're kicking off the morning with strategic plan. And just to give context to this conversation, we started talking about a strategic plan a few years ago. During the pandemic, it became very evident that, this district has been a district that just continues to support all things, the whole child, the entire community, and really wanting to have conversations around equity led us to thinking about how it was time for us to revamp our strategic plan and take on a more traditional approach to the strategic plan, where we create a 5-year plan that gives us direction, create goals around the plan, hold ourselves accountable as an organization to make sure that we are investing and prioritizing in the ways that we want to do. And so we then entered into a search. We wanted to find someone that could come in and work with us, really understanding the culture and the context of our district, because we believe that what we have going on here is pretty special, and there is lots of assets to build on within our school community. At CSBA, our former board member Christina Flores and I happened to attend a work session where the superintendent from Huntington Beach was talking about their strategic plan work. And so they pointed to Dr. Suzette's lovely work, and something that really was important for us at the time was understanding how we can engage our entire school community to be a part of the conversation as the board develops a strategic plan. And so Dr. Lovely's approach was something that really resonated with us because it takes into account building on the assets of community and really reaching into our community to make sure that there's an alignment across the board. And so here we are. We know that it took us a little bit longer to get here because we had a few transitions as a board, and we also wanted to wait until we had, to really think about the school year ahead. And so excited to take on this work and really build on who we are as a district, create priorities, bring forward our equity policy, our equity statement to really frame this work, and then set the direction for the district for the next 5 years. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Lovely. Dr. Lovely, Mrs. Rivas and I have had the opportunity to connect a few times, and so today she's going to give us an overview on the plan for the framework for the strategic plan and give the opportunity for the board to really chime in and have a conversation around how this becomes something that we can execute together in the El Monte City School District. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Suzette Lovely.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today, trustees. It's actually very timely that you're doing this in light of the other things you have coming, a bond, a facility master plan, and governance work. So a strategic plan will help you really frame that work. And I'm just really honored to be here. I want to make sure that I can, wait, I might need some from Robert, no. Let me know what I need to do to click. And I know you have a packed agenda. So I'm going to set just a framework for the discussion. I want the board to be able to discuss and process, there we go. There we go. Thank you. I was pressing the wrong way. I want the board to be able to process and understand some context for this work and ruminate on it a little bit during our time. And again, I'm going to be cognizant of the fact that you have a long day and you have some other agenda items. But really, essentially, to create a relevant plan for 3 to 5 years in the future. That's what districts and organizations usually do. You don't create a plan too far out, because who could anticipate a pandemic which might change your plan, or who can anticipate our AI? Our world changes so quickly. So as you're thinking about this for El Monte, you know, what has changed here for you and what is changing? That needs to be the context, the floor, really, for your planning. But it's driven by your board policies. This doesn't just come from the sky, so to speak, of how districts embark on this work. And so your board policy, as Dr. Garcia mentioned, that really is going to frame this work as your equity policy. You have a firm commitment here in this district, and I commend you for that, to equity, and to make sure that equity and the conversations around equity are framing all the things that you do, all the decisions that you make. When you talk about your facilities master plan, you're going to be thinking about what spaces will ensure that those equitable environments are existent. So this is just, I didn't put all the words of your board policy there, but this is what frames this work in accordance with your board policy relative to your equity, or will inform this work relative to your equity statement. And then you also have a board policy around vision. So your board policy says that the board will adopt a long-range vision, and it will reflect the importance of preparing students for the future academically, professionally, and personally. So as we look at what your strategic plan might include or should include, it would have all of those elements to adhere to your vision in your board policy. And then you also have a board policy about the actions that the board will take around the vision. It's embedded in your LCAP. The hard thing about the LCAP is very technical. No one reads your 215-page LCAP, or I think it was around that, and it's probably less than many districts, and is inspired by that. So you've got your legal requirement of your LCAP, which you are still going to do, but how are you going to distill this work to make it meaningful in the local context here for your staff and for your community? And then you also have an AR, an administrative regulation, that defines what the process will include. So this work is driven by your existing policies and guiding frameworks, and part of your administrative regulation says that you will get input from your education partners in some way. It doesn't tell you exactly how you need to do it, but it gives the context for getting some input around this, and that you'll adopt your final plan at a regular board meeting. So I went ahead and looked at what you currently have, and by the way, not every district has a vision and a mission. There's nothing in the law that says you must have both. You must have one or the other. So you can also decide. We've seen some districts that just will have a vision statement or just a mission statement, and that is the guiding, frames their work. Here are your current mission and vision statements in El Monte. There is nothing wrong with them. Nothing at all. Other than the fact that if you asked somebody to tell you what they were, they probably couldn't do that. And it's because, and we do this in education, we think we get paid by the word. We love words. And so they're very lengthy oftentimes, but they're not really doing what you want them to do, which is to inspire the work of your employees. Vision statements and mission statements are generally for your employees, not your customers. Your customers are your students, but they're to motivate and inspire your employees and staff. But you have two wonderful current vision and mission statements. The tendency that districts want to do is they want to take their existing statement and try to tweak it And what we've seen happen is it just becomes more convoluted and doesn't really reflect what you are hoping it will reflect. So we recommend that boards, you just start from scratch. Set aside what was there. There might be some words from your current statements that end up in your final statements, but you want to start from scratch. So we have a lot of scholars and people that have studied this outside of education, and I think we get a lot of good advice from people that aren't just in education, of developing inspiring vision and mission statements that really drive their work. Companies like Nike, Google, that we really reflect and admire and try to reflect how are they so successful. And so experts that have studied this work say you should first start with your why. Your vision statement is your why. It's oriented toward the future. It's a point in time that you want to achieve. I call it practical dreaming. Practical dreaming. So when Walt Disney said, I'm going to leave animation and I'm going to create the happiest place on earth, he didn't say how he was going to do it. It came later with the mission that he was going to create a theme park to do this work. But he first said, I want to create the happiest place on earth where families and children can come and enjoy themselves. Then the mission of building the theme park in 1955, we're almost at 70 years of Disneyland's history. Then he laid out that plan with his Imagineers and the mission that we would have these different lands around it. But he didn't start with, I'm going to create these lands, Tomorrowland and Fantasyland and all of those things. He first said, I've got this pie in the sky dream. And so starting there helps us not be so fettered to just what we know and what we can construct at that moment in time. And then the values are framed afterwards. Our values are our guiding principles or our philosophies that guide this work. And what experts say is if we start a vision process with our core values are impossible to change. And so what we've seen is if people start with their values first, that people get locked onto their value, I believe X or Y, and they're not as open to what the vision. You want to start with your practical dreaming first, then your mission, what it is the business, the core of your work, and then go to your values. You have values right now as a board policy, so you'll just update those. What values then are going to make sure that that vision is realized and the mission is achieved? And we know that it's got to be more than just test scores. We know that academic glory doesn't always pave the way for a well-lived life. And your current statements now talk about preparing students professionally and for life beyond the world here that they'll have with you in El Monte. You have them just for a short period of time in their lives, 8 years, 9 years when you count kindergarten, or 10 maybe with TK. They have lives well beyond, but you're forming the foundation. So another component that we see in strategic plans, sometimes it's called a graduate profile when it's a K-12 district. We see it called a portrait of an 8th grader or a learner profile for K-8 districts. But this is this limited set of core dispositions or these habits of mind that will ensure that your students leave you when you're ready to hand them off to the high school, that they're ready for that next step. Here's an example of a K-8 district. This is Fallbrook, and I shared this only because I loved what they did. They have their core dispositions, you can see them on the wall: caring, scholarly, confident, resilient, innovative. They made wallpaper out of this. So this is in all of their classrooms. It's not just a poster on the wall. It actually frames these core dispositions. So students see them every day, and there's their introduction to it. They're a Leader in Me school, and so everything they do there is around leadership. They work with Franklin Covey and Leader in Me. So every context says our Fallbrook leaders will be. But it just gives you an idea of how districts have approached that learner profile work. So the process itself and the outcomes for it will be a vision statement. And again, the board may decide, maybe we only want a vision statement. We don't need a mission as well. Or maybe we just want a mission statement, not a vision. But the vision, and you can see what a description is there. The vision creates this ideal state, this thing that it's aspirational, practical dreaming. It's not something that you're going to put your hand on, that students are going to learn their multiplication tables. It's more conceptual. And then your mission is the reason your district exists. It should be something around education or learning. We exist at schools really for learning or education. Then your learner profile. Your strategic plan, once you have your vision and mission and learner profile done, your strategic plan will include those key goal areas for the year in which you're going to focus on. You're probably going to have a priority goal, I would assume, in facilities and master planning. Those things that are going to be the core of your goals. And then, of course, as you do this work, very often we see districts work, to rebrand themselves as well. And maybe they, how they push this information out or how it's shared. It helps elevate currency in your organization. And this really is a way to connect the learner's needs with their interests with resources, their resources with experiences with life, and life with the modern world. That's the purpose of all this. Now, in your board policy, it says that you will engage education partners. And it kind of lists of how those partners might be engaged. So one of the suggestions we have, and this is the board can consider as you form this guiding coalition, this larger group, it's a vertical slice of your constituency. So teachers are represented, your associations, community members, board members. We can have a subcommittee of board members represented. Your cabinet is on there, and your principals and other administrators. So this vertical slice of this guiding coalition would help get some ideas generated. Ultimately, the board will decide on the final vision and mission statements, or vision statement if you just choose to have one. But you want to get others' voice in there, and your board policy says you will do that. Student voice is really important in this process as well, because we're creating this aspirational vision for the children that are here in our seats right now. So getting student voice is important. And then a learner profile subcommittee to look at those final processes. And then you want a communication loop. So after every meeting, in between meetings, and usually the meetings are 4 to 6 weeks apart, you would update. You could have a item on your agenda, just a quick update on strategic planning. You might be Dr. Garcia out talking in your schools and update, if you're talking at staff meetings. So this communication looping where people know this is happening and why it's happening. And this is, it's a long slide and hard to read, but essentially I tried to put together a framework too, so the board could see the context for this kind of in one setting. If the board decides to engage with a guiding coalition to do this work, we would do this meeting in steps. The meetings are an hour and a half. The reason is if we get people together for an 8-hour day and say create the vision statement, it will not be what you want it to. People will get tired, and it will end up being a lot of words that may or may not be the words that reflect your ideal state. So what I have found in doing this work, and I've done this with several districts now, you accordion this approach. You do this a little bit at a time, and you come back together at your second meeting, and you reflect on what you talked about at your first meeting, and then you build. So this would be a perspective outline as that would go. So it ends up becoming about a 4-month process. So here's an example of a K-6 district. I worked with them in San Diego. So they had just a mission statement. They did not have a vision statement. So there was their mission statement. And again, I don't think we could find one thing wrong with that mission statement if we looked at any of the words in there, but it was 56 words. So they wanted a vision and a mission. They ended up coming up with, they call it their vivid vision. So it's inspiring wonder and discovery in learning and life. That's their practical dreaming, that they're inspiring their K-6 students to wonder and discover. And then their mission statement, which is what's the business of the district, is where learners find their voice, share their gifts, and advance the world. And one of the ways that they came up with that mission statement, one of their students that they brought back, a 12th grader, a senior who had gone through their system, was hearing impaired. And she said, we bring we bring students back, by the way, to talk to the Guiding Coalition. And she said, what I loved about Solana Beach was it gave me my voice. I was hearing impaired and I didn't have a lot of friends. But this is a place where I came and gave me my voice. It resonated with everybody in that room. And so it ended up as being part of their mission statement. And then they also went and they did a rebranding of their logo. So you see their previous logo. Again, nothing was wrong with it, but they decided they wanted a refresh to make it look more current. So they had a logo design contest, and they had submissions from everybody, members of the community, students, and then there's their new logo. The bottom line for this is you're deciding for them. That's what this work is all about. And then as we just end here, and then we'll open it up for discussion, thinking about whatever is in your strategic plan, this is a dilemma for board members, superintendents, cabinets, everybody. There are more good ideas than a school district has the capacity to execute. Our teachers are with those students only 180 days. And we know that we have never found an idea in education that we don't love. So we have to try to bifurcate all those things that we love into what is the most important, what's the priority of our priorities here as a school district. And then let's have laser-like focus, like air traffic controllers. Air traffic controllers have a lot of planes in the sky, and they're paying attention to all of them. But the plane they're paying the most attention to is the one that's landing. You land one plane at a time. So that's how we want to approach this process of strategic planning for a school district. We have to stop the 250-page LCAP, turn that into the county and the state and get it approved. It's an obligation. And I don't want to assume it's not important. It is. Don't worry, Dr. Pinedo, you still have to do the LCAP. But it's not necessarily what someone's going to read and be your roadmap, per se. So this mindset that the board and the cabinet and the staff need to really have, our conventional thinking in education is all our goals are important. And if we just tell people to work harder, or we have more PD, we'll accomplish all those goals. We want to get to the mindset of many of our goals are important in our schools, but there are only 3 to 5 that are wildly important. These are the goals that we're going to execute with laser-like precision. This comes from the book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, which is written by Franklin Covey, and how successful companies succeed in achieving their goals without having too much. So the analogy that I also share in this is, you think about this, and I think some of us in this room, probably many of us, were not alive then, but some of us were. And if you think about when we embarked in this thing called the space race, when we started, Americans had the know-how at the time to launch a satellite before Sputnik. But President Eisenhower was reluctant to enter the space race because he thought that a U.S. satellite flying over Earth would be considered an act of war by the Soviet Union. So then they launched Sputnik, and that was a big blow to our nation. Our schools changed our whole science program after Sputnik. It became a very driving force for education because it was such a blow to us, and that began the space race. And so President Kennedy in 1962, he gave a speech at Rice University that set the course for this unimaginable dream. It wasn't even a practical dream then, it was unimaginable. And he said that that humans, not a dog or a monkey, because we had animals go up in space, but not humans, would explore space. And so the vision that was set for the space program was that human space exploration is this greatest adventure of all time. He didn't start with, we didn't even have the technology to get a man to the moon by the end of the decade and bring him home safely. We had no technology to do that. So he started the vision, and this began the work with the mission. The mission was then to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade and bring those people back safely. And then the specific goals were identified. And so there were very clear action steps that made a moon landing possible. And part of that was reconfiguring NASA from a military operation to a civilian operation. NASA was a military operation before. So they didn't start with the goals. The president set this unimaginable vision, then the mission of what we needed to do, man to the moon by the end of the decade, then those action steps began. So we started subcontracting with aerospace pioneers, like Grumman, Rocketdyne, McDonnell Douglas, IBM, General Motors. There were huge aerospace engineers or companies that began. And in the end, over 400,000 people could say that they had a hand in landing Americans on the moon. And then their values and beliefs framed this, which is that our quest for knowledge and progress can't be deterred in America, and we're also not going to let the Soviets beat us. That was a national sentiment of our nation at the time. So we know when the right priority goals are established and the right actions are taken, your mission can be accomplished and your vision can be realized. So I know that was a lot, but I wanted to set some context for the conversation and the questions. So I'll turn it back over to you, President Rivas, or Dr. Garcia. I don't know if you have anything else to share before the board starts discussing.
You know, if I could just illustrate, I might put Teresa on the spot. You know what I'm going to ask you to say, right? You shared the Kennedy story with us a few years back, just thinking about the importance in having clarity in the organization. Can you please just share that with us?
Well, and I don't know if the story is true, but it's a great lesson from the story anyway. There's a story that President Kennedy was visiting NASA, and he ran into a custodian there and asked the custodian, "What is it that you do?" And the custodian said, "I'm here to help land a man on the moon." So he was part of the work as well.
So we often tell that story because we know that there's a need for us to connect dots, right? In such a dynamic and multifaceted organization like an educational institution, there's many priorities. There's going to be always more things that we can do than we have time to do. And I think we've been very fortunate in this district that, and I'll give you some credit here, Steve. The right people are on the board. It's Saturday morning. That's I'm a little off right now. Okay. The right people are part of this organization because the right things are done for people, for kids, for community every single time. But something that's just come up, and I think the pandemic exacerbated kind of our this ask is we need clarity, right? And so whereas I think that, there's a lot of things that bring us together as a district, we do know that moving forward, that clarity is going to be very important, and that it needs to come from, the board in terms of where do we see ourselves, where do we want to go, and then, we're happy to create the plan, the professional development, the metrics to make sure that we're doing the work that we need to do. But it's very clear that we need direction, because there's a lot to do.
Thank you. What a wonderful presentation. Thank you for leading us through it and, helping us to think in better ways about this process. So, board, we're going to have several meetings where we can really flesh out, what this process will look like, because we anticipate beginning in September. However, this is our time right now to begin the conversation. So, any initial thoughts or responses?
I think I just like a little more clarity on what is the what would you call it, the guiding coalition, or that you said a large group. So can you just give a little more context to who that is and how they get selected?
They are selected by the board, the superintendent. Let me go back to that slide too. By you, and you decide how many constituents and who need, those important stakeholders that you feel need to be in the room. And you can have as many as that. Solana Beach District had 80 people, and it's a small K-6 district of 2,300 students. But the board was really specific about they wanted certain people there. So you would decide, trustees, with your superintendent. And then what I do with this group, And again, I know we'll have to talk about, we talked about with President Rivas and Dr. Garcia, is how the board members may be forming a subcommittee, so at least 2 of the board members are there every time. Now, we've had some districts that have all 5 board members come, and then you have to agendize it as a regular meeting each time, but that takes a little bit more work. So board members would be in the room hearing. And so I frame these, lead them through this work of thinking about this aspirational dreaming and recommendations that they would have from the board through this series of 4 times with the full guiding coalition. Then we form a subcommittee of that guiding coalition. Let's say you have 40 people, maybe your subcommittee is 10. That's determined by you with the board's input of who's on that subcommittee to flesh out then those learner profile dispositions, because people are going to come up with 50 core dispositions that are important. So to flesh those out, give them some definitions so that when things are brought to the board for final approval and vetting, you're not having to start completely from scratch. You have some context of work to work from.
Okay, and yeah, and that was my other question is everybody participating in all of those stages?
You would like the guiding coalition, you want consistency because it's hard if someone just comes at meeting 3 and we've already talked about the vision and mission and we've told stories around it and how it's important, then they don't have the context. So whoever is selected for the guiding coalition, or whatever you want to call it, you can call it focus groups, you can call it anything you'd like, they should at least be able to commit to the 4 sessions.
I would agree. I would think that it would be an entire commitment, right? You know, when I first heard Huntington Beach talk about the work and how they brought people together, there was some dynamics at play that they also shared as part of that workshop. And there was lots going on in the district, and it was a brand new superintendent. And when they said, I think there were 80 members on that committee as well, I thought, what, 80 members? Like, you know, how do you get work done with 80 people in the room? And so that piqued my curiosity. I want to meet the person that was able to bring 80 people in the room and, you know, and do this work. But the more I heard, and I had the chance to talk to the superintendent from Huntington Beach and a few others that have done this process, you know, the importance of really just having different perspectives. So I think we can start off by really talking about who's in the room. So you have parents, but even within parents, there's just many different perspectives in that group, right? If you talk about associations, if you just talk about one of the associations, there's different perspectives within the association. And so the importance of having variety and different perspectives so that at the end of the day, people feel very committed to, you know, the final product because all voices were heard. I don't know what our number looks like, but I'm really eager to really start thinking that through alongside the board and cabinet to think about how we can get people in the room to be a part of this process.
And I was wondering, so session 1, it says current high school seniors. Is that meant to be those who've
Yes.
graduated from our district?
So what we do is we kick off the first meeting with seniors that are at your high school that went through your system. And you, Dr. Garcia, helped pick those 3 or 4. And I asked them 3, it's kind of like inside the actor's studio, they get on the stage first, and we ask them 3 questions. What about your schooling, your education in El Monte Elementary School District resonates with you? What is helpful, what has been helpful to you as you're now a senior and ready to graduate? Then we ask them question 2, what do you wish had happened for you when you were in K-8 that might have made you better prepared to be a senior? And the third question is, what advice do you have for all these people in the room as they're considering setting a vision and mission? What do we need to know from you? So we start with them, and then we also talk, Dr. Garcia, that we might have 8th graders as part of this process as well, but we bring seniors back that first kickoff.
Yeah, I was wondering too, I don't know if we're getting into these level of details, like maybe sophomores who've done 1 year of high school, because it'll be a little more fresh as to like, was I prepared, you know, that kind of thing. So anyway, just.
We can talk it through. I think there's no right or wrong. So let me just clarify something. That was the piece that resonated with me the most, because oftentimes we create a lot of solutions and we don't ask the people that we're targeting to support, right? Our students. I had probably one of the best years in my career this year for many reasons, but having a student advisory group, I mean, there was no, like, I didn't have to, ask the question 10 times to get a response. Like, they were very straightforward. And I think I've shared this experience or this conversation about like musical theater, right? The kids said, we love that we're doing musical theater, but no one's even asking us what we want to perform. Like, we don't resonate with the Disney characters that, like the Cinderella story. It's not my narrative. I mean, these are their words. And I thought, I ran to Teresa's office and I said, Teresa, are we asking the kids what they want to do? Or are we just kind of like picking, the storylines that we think are going to be really cute on stage and a fun experience for kids? And so we just kind of like stared at each other. But they definitely have strong opinions about what they want their experience to look like and be like. And it's really forward thinking. And so every step of the way this year, I was just like, my jaw was wide open because there's lots of things to learn and gauge from our students. I will say that because we're not a unified school district, we make a big attempt to try to connect, But again, it's at an institutional level, and the student experience is really important. I love the idea of talking to seniors. They're on their way to the next chapter, and they're reflecting on, what they needed, what they got, what they didn't. I like the idea of 8th graders, right? It's fresh in their mind. I like the idea of like in the middle of the story. So I think there's ways of doing that together. And I did want to say that I love the idea of having student voice in this process. That was probably before the 80-member group. When I heard that students were involved, I thought, that's it, because our kids are they're just so bright. They're forward thinking. They know exactly, what we need to do to improve the work that we're doing. And oftentimes we don't engage them.
Thank you. I'm excited about the student voice and really just the opportunity to collect and hear many voices, because that's something the board as a practice doesn't really get to do very often. So,
Yeah.
I felt like you were about to say something.
Oh, yeah, I'll just go next.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, hi. So, things that were kind of just resonating with me when I was, hearing all this information, right, is questions that I come across from friends, from family, or even within, school board network is, why should I send my child to Monte City School District? And another question is, tell me about your school district. What kind of things are you doing? And my most popular one with my friends lately, what is a good school district, right? You hear that a lot, like, oh, well, they go to a good school district. And I'm always like, oh, well, tell me more, and it's always test scores. And that's just kind of the default. Well, my so-and-so told me it's a good school district. And it's usually around test scores. And I'm like dying inside because I'm not, before I give them the speech. But what I like about this presentation is we could really then use our why and our vision to answer these questions so quickly and directly. Like, well, tell me about your district, or why should I send my child to Monte City School District? And we can say it in 1 or 2 sentences. This is the why. This is the work that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we can then give examples about our musical theater program and so on and so on. So that was kind of the mindset too that I have in my mind, is connecting the why to being able to answer these very common questions that we get in our community or within our friends. A second thing I want to highlight, I really liked what you shared about intent gets lost in words sometimes. And I'm going to say most people, including myself, if you ask me, like, tell me what's the difference between a mission and a vision, right? And you're like, I'll get back to you, right? So I really like that permission to be like, oh, we can just decide to have one, and to simplify it and to really be specific and meaningful with the words that we are using.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the organization that this is going to take to produce this. Likewise, I've always felt like vision, mission. What is that difference? And I appreciate that we're able to highlight those differences, and yes, the simplification of those items. Have you had experience in other school districts with, like, what I'm thinking about is I'm looking at the old mission and the old vision. And obviously somebody put, or a group of somebody's put some thought and effort into this. Have you ever had those people who came up with the previous vision and mission involved in the process of coming up with a new one? And was there like was there a conflict, or was there, I'm trying to understand that whole aspect.
Yes, because people have been in districts a long time, so it might be a teacher, a board member even. And I've heard the same thing. I was part of this 5 years ago. This is so much better now. I feel like we're coming up with something meaningful. Or I remember, and they will have specific things they remember. We sat down and we wanted to get out of there after a day, and we were tired. A current district that I just finished working with, a board member said, we did this, but we did it with not the right people in the room, and we came up with just a lot of words and a strategic plan that no one else really knew was out there. So I've not heard anything, and there's a lot of ways you can do this. There's other companies that do this. I think this way, it honors what was done before. I've never heard somebody say, oh my gosh, that vision statement means so much to me. And one district I did in San Diego County, they had it in their boardroom, and the day the board adopted it, they said, can someone take that down now, the old one, and put the new one up? Because they were long. So I've not ever had anybody come and storm a meeting and say, please. Not like when you try to change a logo or a mascot, or you don't have that.
Thank you.
And I have a couple of questions, just understanding the process in terms of like practical, like today, this is just to kind of discuss and understand what's coming next. First question is like, what's the next step, or are there any other like specific outcomes for today, like the information you would need from us, and then what's the next step for this?
I would defer to the superintendent or board president on that.
So thinking, working kind of backwards, the idea is that we will be done with this work in springtime. And so mapping it out, ideally, we'd like to start off with the first 4 sessions in the fall. And so we do have some tentative dates. I think we have to solidify, but the idea is that we would start September 16th with the first Guiding Coalition meeting, possibly October 14th, the second meeting. I think we're going back and forth on trying to find a November date, and November's a little tricky because we have Thanksgiving and Veterans Day, and then possibly ending December the 2nd with session 1, 2, 3, and 4. So again, working our way backwards, there are 3 board meetings between now and then that the board will have to continue having conversations around how we frame the strategic plan, right? This approach is one in which we bring the entire community together. I think, there's an opportunity for the board to talk in the next 3 sessions about what this means, right? For the board to have a meaningful conversation around our strategic plan, some creating a vision. I love the idea of what did you say? The Kennedy, unimaginable, right? So there's the practical, but I love the idea of unimaginable, building that together with practical. And so I think there's opportunities for the board to have conversations. And then when we start the work with the Guiding Coalition, we have a direction to move into.
Okay, so at our next meetings, it would be like, we would say, okay, who do we want on this Guiding Coalition?
Yes, thank you. So we
yeah.
would then determine a subcommittee prior to, I think we would map out the entire year,
And
really.
solidify dates for the Guiding
Yes.
Coalition. If you backwards map, your idea would be by your April board meeting, you want to adopt a new vision, mission, and learner profile in conjunction with your LCAP. And then you'll start working on the priority goals. So that would be probably,
So this time next year, we have goals for the years ahead. We have long-term goals, the short-term goals, and the whole plan developed.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I can kind of see both directions. So before that first Guiding Coalition meeting, do we come up with like, these are our big picture things, right? Like I have, certain statements that I would come up with, right, related to this, that, your demographics don't determine your success and things like that. Do we come up with that and say to the guiding committee, these are our framework, or do we let it be more organic from their side, see what they come up with, and then we step in. Like, where does our, we don't want to stifle, but we also want to give guidance.
I think that you're stating those are values and beliefs, so that's why doing your values and beliefs would be at the end. And when you adopt that final vision, then your values and beliefs that you then articulate and adopt and make into your board policy will solidify that.
I guess in terms of how much direction from our point of view of what, whatever we think, if I have an idea, like I want the mission statement to be this, do we tell that to that committee, or do we let them come up with something and then say, oh, okay, this aligns or this doesn't?
I would suggest if the board really wants input from education partners, you let it be organic. If you don't, then the board could just do this work on their own without a guiding coalition. And so it's up to the board. If you feel that you want to do this work yourself, then you should do that. What happens when you form a committee, and you have a lot of committees on several things. If you form a committee and you don't listen to people's input, they feel like, why did you bring me here to contribute? So that's up to the board, and that could be part of the board's discussion. If the board feels that this is work that you want to, you want to create that vision, you're the employer. Right. You're the employer, and the employer creates the vision, not the customer. I don't create Starbucks vision, but I go there every day. So maybe you want to look at it. I'm flexible, so however the board wants to work, we can.
Yeah, what I imagine over the next, couple of meetings is that we can figure out, what kind of input we're really looking
I guess
for.
that's what I'm asking, yeah.
Yeah. Because I think there is a sense of the board giving some direction to the guiding coalition, right? If the board, wants to go in the direction of the guiding coalition, but to figure out what kind of direction to give it, what's the ask, what's the takeaway at the end with that guiding coalition. And one thing that I don't think we've mentioned today, but Dr. Lovely had mentioned it before, is there's the potential even for agendizing those meetings 5 and 6 of the subcommittee of the guiding coalition. If the entire board wanted to be involved, more intimately with, some of those final meetings. So from what I understood in our prior conversations, is there's some flexibility in how we'd want to, figure out the board's involvement in the process.
Yeah, okay.
So all 5 of you could be there. I just finished in El Rancho Unified School District, and on their 4th Guiding Coalition meeting, they agendized it as a special meeting, called it to order and all that, and then the board members sat at different tables. And then they adjourned the meeting. There was nothing to report out and no action, but all 5 got to come then.
Yeah, okay. Just kind of thinking of this is new, so just
Yeah.
seeing like what, or if we say like, we want to make sure equity is included in whatever they're doing, right? So maybe that's sort of the next meeting, is figuring out those, certain maybe
Right, and
themes or.
You could frame that direction. That's why we put that in here, that
Yeah.
equity probably would be, and that could be framed for the Guiding Coalition. Equity drives this work, and whatever other policy or you want.
President Rivas, if I may, as well. So I'm really geeking out over this. I'm very excited about this work. This year, our management team engaged in improvement science to help solve a problem of practice. And so improvement science is looking at the root causes in the systems that have caused a problem within a school system or within an organization. And so the problem of practice we identified is clarity and fidelity to initiatives or implementation of whatever comes out of, ed services or the district office or the team. Because what would happen occasionally is, not occasionally, often, is we would meet with our site leaders, with our department leaders. We would, give direction on an initiative, and then they all went to their prospective sites, and it was 14 different messages. And implementation went in 14 different directions. And so, the question came up, why is this happening? At one site, they did exactly what we asked of them, and at another site, they took it in a whole different direction, right? And so we dug in, we looked at some root causes, and what our team came up with is communication is one, but another one is really understanding what is the vision, what is the mission, what are our priorities. And so they were really asking us for, we need that clarity. We need that laser focus on what our priorities are, what's expected from us. And it makes me, I went back to this conventional thinking versus strategic thinking. We're living in conventional thinking. We're telling them to work harder. We're providing more professional development, more resources, but we're trying to do everything instead of being very laser focused with what's wildly important, right? And then, the conversation that came out of that as well was, so, we might buy into some of these initiatives or these priorities, but we also weren't part of that conversation, and so that commitment is not going to be as steadfast as we would like it to be. That's what came from the systems thinking, right? And so that was a big takeaway for us. And so, in Ed Services, we're really looking at how do we really focus in, align it to our priorities, stay laser focused, and then include them in part of this work of whatever our priorities are, so that the commitment is there and it's not just buy-in. Because as one of our team members said, I can buy in, but I can also buy out. Whereas opposed to, if I'm committed, if I'm part of this, then I'm going to commit to it as well. And so I'm just thinking about all of the work that we've done this year and how perfectly it aligns to this and how excited I am about where this is going to lead us. So thank you. And thank you.
Does the board have any other questions for Dr. Lovely while she's here?
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to whatever those next steps might be. Thank you, I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you for being here, and we look forward to working with you. Okay, board, are we doing okay? Any stretch break now or after the next one, maybe?
I'm gonna get coffee.
Oh, okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, we'll resume our meeting, and item 2 on our agenda is the Facilities Master Plan, and I'll turn things over to Dr. Garcia to give introductions.
Thank you. I actually am going to turn it over to Mr. Herrera to kick off the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia and board. So first of all, what a great presentation by Dr. Lovely discussing strategic plan for the district and outlining the goals and priorities and the framework that we'll be setting for the direction of the district going forward. As we introduce our next presenter here, Kim Coffin from Perkins Eastman, who partnered with us dating back to 2022 when we started our master plan process. I do want to highlight that there are very strong connections between our strategic plan and our facilities master plan. And so when we think about the facilities that our students are learning in and our staff are working in, right, it's important that there's no better time to update our master plan and also introduce a strategic plan so we can really set the direction for the districts and making sure we have the conditions that are appropriate to set up our students and staff for success on our campuses. The master plan is not just about infrastructure and buildings, about creating those learning environments that are conducive to the goals that we will outline in our strategic plan. And so with that, we realized a few years ago that it was time for an update. Our master plan was last updated in 2008, right? And as we know, our enrollment trends have significantly changed since 2008. The needs of our district have evolved, right? And so in 2022, especially coming out of a pandemic, no better time with the introduction of a new grade level with TK on all of our campuses. It was the appropriate time to kick this process off. We started the process in 2022. We welcomed in Perkins Eastman to partner with us in the development of the master plan. And here we are a few years later. We concluded the master plan, and we'll be providing the board with an update. Two things that I would like to point out to the board is know that this plan was developed with the input of all stakeholders. We went through an extensive process of getting input from all of our stakeholders, students, parents, the community, the board, and staff. And the other thing that we'll hear this morning from Kim is there's $600 million of needs identified in our facilities master plan. And so the need obviously would have been much greater if not for all of the good work that we've done over the past 25 years or so with bond improvements. But know that there is quite a bit of need in our facilities master plan. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Kim Confine from Perkins Eastman to reintroduce the facilities master plan to the board and continue the discussion.
Great, thank you, Jose, and pleasure to see you guys again. It's been a couple years now, and I was just reflecting on about 2 years ago, we were in this room with leadership, and I think there were a total of 40 or 50 people in the room. And one of the things that we talked about were these initial guiding principles, and I'd like to share those with you. And it's directly related to facilities. So our schools are places we nurture the whole child. They're lighthouses for caring of our community. They're homes that we take care of and wisely maintain. They're an attraction and opportunity. The school can be a leader of changing environment, as we know, and what I really loved was this bridge from our legacy to our future. So you have a really strong leadership in the superintendents that have gone before Dr. Garcia, and there's that legacy still to be honored, but there is that future and that change that also needs to be recognized. So I wanted to make sure that I started the meeting with those guiding principles because they were drivers on how we proposed improvements on the campus. And so for us, that's the lens that we looked at. So with that, today we're going to talk a little bit about the facility master plan conclusions. These are very high level. We do have an executive summary that's about 17 pages. I'm not sure if that was shared, but we'll share that after this meeting. What you have in front of you is this presentation as well as the proposed improvements for each of the campuses. We have the cost, state funding. So part of the work we hired as a sub-consultant to our team, CL Consulting, and they were involved in analyzing your state eligibility. Additionally, we had another consultant, MHP Structural Engineers. We did a couple analysis of the structural systems on a few of your sites that were built in the 1930s. Then we described some of the scope breakdowns and summarize. And I do have a couple questions that I will stop on a couple slides. Hopefully get some engagement as we go, and feel free to, ask questions along the way. So some of the things that I think was important to acknowledge is that you have wonderful opportunities within the current structure of your facilities to create great learning environments. So many of your school sites are orientated in the proper solar orientation for natural daylight and views, which is important. If your building is not in the right orientation, it costs more to maintain the heating and ventilation systems. In addition, there's some wonderful windows and outdoor spaces that have a great opportunity for outdoor learning. Parity is going to be probably the theme of today, and equity. But we understand that there are needs that vary at each of the schools. We looked at also your enrollment projections in terms of the amount of classrooms that were needed. And so we looked at optimizing what we were seeing relative to the amount of portables that were on your campus and how we can improve the optimization. Community schools was a big part of how we viewed the campuses, where there were facilities that were lacking to support community school activities. We definitely saw that as an opportunity to improve in the facility master plan. And this includes learning centers, which I'll describe a little bit, parent centers, and assembly spaces. Expanded learning opportunities also became important. Many of your after-school programs are occupying some of the portables because as declining enrollment happens, there is space available. And also looking at how to enhance functionality. So there are some sites that required new gymnasiums and fitness spaces, as well as arts and STEM and science. So what I think is important to describe as this master plan, as you view this master plan, it really is not set in stone. It's an intention to show an approach to how we might improve all of your campuses. If there was discussion at the beginning of the master plan about looking at grade level reconfiguration or some sort of consolidation, we would have incorporated that into the master plan. So see this as kind of a view in time, but it does allow you to now sort of see very isolated scopes, and I'll share that with you in a couple slides.
Kim, just a really quick comment going back to the past slide. So as a reminder to the board, she talked about enrollment optimization. As part of this process, if you recall, we did bring in a demographer to provide some long-term projections. And so in the short term, the next 5 years, it showed that we were going to become a district that did below 6,000 students, right? And within the next 10 years, a district that would go below 5,000 students, right? And so I believe back in the 80s, we peaked at around 13,000 students, and there's been a steady decline in enrollment over the years. And so we thought that was important to bring forward as we looked at capacity and something you'll talk on the next slide. Another thing that, again, I think the opportunity for us to the timing of updating the master plan and the completion of the master plan, discussing the next steps, aligns well with just where we're at this point in time, right? With the community schools award to El Monte City School District and all of our 14 schools being awarded that, no better time for us to discuss how we can incorporate and continue to strengthen our facilities so we can incorporate and make sure that all 14 of our sites continue and have the facilities conducive to that. And also expanded learning opportunities. When we started the discussion back in 2022, we were just launching our expanded learning opportunity program. And now to be at the conclusion of this process and discussing prioritization, it really allows us to look at the robust programming that we have with our ELOP programming and our after-school enrichment days that we have, and incorporating that into our facilities master plan. So no better time, and I'll just add as one more point on there, the expansion of TK for all 4-year-olds. We're speeding things up here in the Monte City School District. In this next school year, which starts in a few weeks, we will be welcoming students 1 year ahead of what the state is mandating to go into effect in 2025-26. So TK for all 4-year-olds is here and in Monte starting in a few weeks. And so no better time to update our master plan and go through this prioritization exercise with the Board of Education.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's a great example of how the function of TK works, having access to restrooms and the appropriate play structures. May not have been anticipated or is not currently in your current facilities. So functionality is an important part of how you view these improvements. So this summarizes your current classroom count. There's obviously spaces outside of that classroom count, like kitchens, NPR, innovation labs, libraries, and so forth. But based on the projected enrollment, we were looking at 225 classrooms needed as a sustainable approach. As a result of that, we were able to remove 94 portables, and just the cost to maintain portables, which are already outdated and their lifespan is ended, and it saves the district by removing those portables because you don't have to maintain them. So again, our classroom count at 262 does not include the Head Start. But what I think is also important to reflect on is there was work done in 2000 where you were able to bring new classrooms into your campuses, and I think you probably still refer to them as new, but they're like, going on 25 years. But I mean, you do have some wonderful facilities from the 1930s too. So I think this is a really cool stat that almost 50% of your permanent classrooms are newer-ish. And it means something that you've done and you've thought about that and you've made those improvements. Whereas I see other districts, and unfortunately they didn't have that vision. So that's good, but there are parity issues that we'll see going forward. One thing I wanted to reflect on, which I really love this, I basically looked at both, we did a district-wide survey, and we surveyed teacher, staff, and parents. And what we ended up doing was we isolated their top 10 requests, and I was trying to find commonality. And this is the top 6 with the commonality applied. And I really love that teacher and staff satisfaction are at the top, because I think there's a bit of, my feeling on this is that there's a caring component to your community. And knowing that your teachers are happy means that the classroom environment is going to be happy. So I love that kind of top, understanding the needs of creating great learning environments. But number 2 is addressing building deficiencies, 21st century learning environments, and ensuring equitable access to resources, safety and security, and supporting social, emotional wellness. So I really think this is a reflection of kind of the things that we heard from your community. And we were able to also work with the students as well. So that was a fun experiment. So, before we go to that, I wanted to ask, as you have reviewed this material, are there any specific projects or areas that you believe should be prioritized due to their significant impact on students and community? I'm putting you guys on the spot.
So just in general, like school sites or specific components of?
I would love all input, but if you want to go that route, that's fine. But I was thinking more as a broad statement.
So I would say just, it always kind of brings to mind some schools that feel much more welcoming than others.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to name specific locations or not, but so I think that, and this might be getting into detail, but I think, we had this great musical theater program this spring, and it highlighted some disparities in the facilities to put on productions and things like that in terms of just space and sound and all of those things. So I think it kind of matching the programs that we want to be able to implement.
And I like how you're defining things that affect both students and families. So as you enter in, is it welcoming? As we assemble, is everything kind of working and is it smooth?
Yeah,
So
and then probably third, I think is just and I don't know if that's part of this discussion, but Norwood and the plans for the school, that we want to use for early childhood access and things like that. I know there's other grants associated with some of that work too.
And that's more of like an overarching service that your community provides.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, for me, excuse me, in having visited, I think about half of the schools in the fall, it really struck me how old some of our classrooms still are. You were talking about, classrooms from the earlier part of the 1900s, right?
Yeah.
And just you see the older materials, and it does create a different environment inside the classroom than, like you mentioned, some of those newer classrooms. So, and along the lines of what you were saying, the disparity then is striking, right? Or the difference between, it could be classrooms within the same school, or particularly between sites.
Good. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just chime in, just kind of just looking at these, the one that stood out for me would be learning environments, right? Providing that 12C learning environments. Because, yeah, one of the things that does stand out when we're going to like open houses, back to school nights, is the classroom, but also when we're going into the science classroom or the art room, right? Those kind of stand out to be, those definitely stand out, right? And be like, oh, well, this school has it, or this school doesn't maybe have that type of science lab.
No, great. Well, those are great. And I wanted to share with you, we're working with Santa Rosa High School, and they're 150 years old. Their building's 100 years old. And you do walk into that building, or into the classroom, and you're like, it feels old, you know? So we're involved in kind of reshaping what that classroom environment will look like. And it does have a direct impact on your families, you know, when they're coming and they're looking at the campuses. And yeah, so it's an important aspect. As mentioned, Jose mentioned our total program at $594 million. What I think is important to acknowledge here is that there is a today's dollar cost at $397 million, and we've escalated some dollar amount that we need to factor in for a 10 to 15-year program. You're going to see at least 14% annual escalation. You're going to see unforeseens on campuses. You're going to see potential change orders, you know, that you didn't anticipate. So that 196 could also be interim housing if you have to do phased approach to modernization. So we want to just make sure that we provide you a number that kind of says an all-in number. What we then did was we shared the cost between the TK5s and TK8s sites. I wanted to note that Durfee, particularly Thompson, that building is about $10 million to modernize. So we did kind of distinguish that differently in our cost estimate. So it just kind of shows you the different types of projects, and then we have sort of the other category that's the support facilities. What we also did was break down these costs into types of projects, and I'll go through that with you in a bit. What does it mean, modernization, full modernization versus light modernization and new construction? But this kind of gives you a sense of where the costs are coming in, with almost half of the cost really focused on your older buildings, the 1930s, and you know, anything that wasn't built after 2000. And so that's a big part of the work. We also included some new projects under new construction that I'll also break down a little bit further for you, as well as outdoor learning, play structures, solar canopies, and improvements to the grounds. We embedded in all of these numbers. I know at the time that we met a year ago, there was the Escher grant, and we had identified like $9 million for new furniture, and that all can be pulled out. This is kind of like a list of projects, and you can strike those because they might be part of another fund source. So this gives you a little bit more detail on the project scope and the different categories. And included in these numbers are all of the design contingencies. We have the GC profit and overhead. We have our division estate architect. The buildings are built to a higher standard, and so with that, it requires additional scope and escalation and contingency. So for the light modernization, we were looking at secure doors, interior and exterior hardware, roof improvements, finishes and furniture, restroom renovations, LED lighting, minor communication and security system upgrades. That's $180 per square foot. And kind of reflecting on some of the comments we received from the students, we asked them what their ideal classroom was and what they can improve. And one of those comments was the lighting. And it's actually quite amazing when lighting changes, you know, because that color is not that sort of yellow glow. It's like this bright, it just makes you feel better in that space. It's small things, but they're important. For full modernization, and we have some reconfiguration, it's about $355 a square foot. That's window replacement, so you have currently probably single-pane windows. If you're going forward, you want to do more energy-efficient window systems, which will help reduce your HVAC load and the cost to operate the HVAC. Plumbing system renovations, HVAC as mentioned, casework, communication security systems, renovations of all of the important core facilities, library, kitchen, and administration. And then the reconfiguration includes a little bit more work as it relates to demolition and reconstruction. Construction, believe it or not, during COVID, we were seeing $1,000 square foot numbers. Fortunately, they've come down over the year or two, but we're not seeing it go down. You know, we anticipate still a 4% escalation every year. The work under new construction included the multi-purpose rooms. There's some, as we looked at parity, we saw some of your multi-purpose rooms at some of your elementary schools were clearly not the kind of function and size and needs that you need to do a true assembly. New gyms and fitness spaces, and some sustainable design features. And then with sites and grounds, updating playfields, landscaping, ADA compliant issues, play structures, outdoor classrooms, and the solar canopies come up again. And then demolition is really part of your new construction. And we anticipate there's hazmat removal as a result of the age of the building. So anything kind of before 1980s would include hazmat. So that kind of breaks down the cost of those different categories. And then this is a wonderful slide. I'm so happy that you guys have this opportunity in front of you, which is basically capturing your existing state modernization eligibility. And what that means in order to capture it is you have to have submitted Division of State Architect approved drawings to the Office of Public School Construction, and prior to that you would have California Department of Ed approval. But that's about a year for a project. You know, if we started today, it takes about a year to get that approval. And as you know, this program is a first come, first serve. So meaning, you know, your neighboring districts will be submitting projects too. And, you know, part of this needs to acknowledge that, you know, the sooner that you can kind of get those plans in, the opportunity for reimbursement in the future. So this is wonderful news. There are some considerations as the state bond potentially might pass in November. They're talking about possibly changing the way that the pupil grants are counted, which you have a baseline based on a certain year snapshot in time. And nothing's been formalized, but again, it's just something to think about as you're planning. And you're probably very familiar with the program, but just to kind of educate everyone, the modernization is to not increase square footage, but you can use it to replace existing classrooms with new, and it's a 60-40 match. And then 50-50 for new construction. At this point, you guys do not have any new construction eligibility, so it doesn't necessarily apply. The preschool program is, as you know, the governor has taken that kind of money away at this time. But I imagine with all the struggles that districts are having, you know, that program will likely show up again, but it's very limited. It's based on socioeconomic, and it's like one grant per district. It's very, very limited. But, you know, you obviously want to capture as many grants as possible. And then because you guys have a couple buildings that were in the 1930s, we included the seismic retrofit grant potential. Again, and just some opportunities for you to look at all aspects. What we had done before we left our last presentation, we did talk about where you might think about prioritization. The first being the full modernization and reconfiguration as a tier 1 project, and maybe some select new construction as it relates to parity. So that's kind of where we landed last year. We ended up adding, I did want to share it. This is a really great slide. So this shows everything in orange shows the light modernization. So those are the schools that received newer buildings in the 2000. What we're showing is those would be lightly modernized, and then there's the aqua color, that's like a full reconfiguration or full modernization. And then you can see the sites where we're proposing new construction. So as you look at your prioritization and parity, you may look at that gray piece and go, oh, if we focused on that, it would be orange the next few years or whatever. So kind of seeing how you can balance these scales based on just kind of looking at the percentage of projects that really only require a light modernization on some of the existing campuses. And I did want to pause here because we have a question about what measures should we consider to ensure the prioritization of projects addresses disparity among different schools and communities. And there's lots of different ways to look at this, so.
I'm sorry, can you just say the question one more time?
Yes.
Yeah.
What measures should we consider, or you consider, to ensure the prioritization of projects addresses disparity among different schools and communities? So it's, what is the criteria? What would be your criteria for determining how to ensure that you address the disparities?
When I first looked at this graph, I thought maybe it was what we had done in the past, right? But this is proposed, right?
Yes,
But I'd
correct.
love to see a graph like this
Yeah.
from the past, because
Got it.
kind of visually summarizes it.
Yeah, the before.
That's a
and
good point, because our it was our construction era was over 20 years. And so it was just a lot of projects. I know Blake knows that very, very well, and he's going to talk about all the different opportunities that we've had as a district. But that's a lot of information. So I think that would be a really good way to capture, and just really celebrate the things that have been done to build on what lies ahead for all of us.
Yeah, and so some I don't know how much it counts or not, but so some schools more recently have had major construction, and a lot of upheaval. And so, depending on what the needs were or how it was going to be done, trying not to have those schools go through a whole big disruption again. I think so. Thinking about that. And then at the same time, schools that haven't had, probably the first grouping of schools that, maybe 20 years ago got the first modern things. I'm assuming those are the ones that have more of the gray bars here. So going back, almost like not necessarily in order, but those that have had the longest since there has been modernization.
So looking at time
So
is
I
an
think
issue.
I think there's a factor there.
And what you might be saying on the construction piece, there's different ways to put your bid package together, and sometimes it may not be concentrated. And so I think what you're referring to is the impact over time, and can you isolate projects so that has minimal impact, or how can you improve? Because if it's like 7 years, yeah, that's a lot of time. Some districts also look at opportunities to do swing space. So using your surplus property, we did that at Irvine Unified. We took over a campus that we were using for warehouse, and we moved to schools into those campuses just for a school year. So they could just really focus on the construction and not, and they can focus on teaching and learning. And so, there's lots of different strategies to think about. Yep. Any other criteria for defining priorities?
I also think too, and this is kind of another long-term question, is, looking at, and I know we have the demographics of the district, but the demographics within each school's service area. So if we have certain schools where, there's the enrollment is declining more steeply, and looking at making sure we're serving those students that are there, but also, prioritizing the areas where we have, more students per se, over, depending on the school site.
I'm curious if you guys are interested in interdistrict transfers. Is there a desire to go to one school or another because of programs? Because the reason why I bring this up is that can potentially trigger, ideas about, well, how do we equalize this so that there's maybe not that kind of movement? And I don't recall that being an issue, but I don't know if that's a sense that you have.
Are you saying that if some of our students leave because a different district has?
Not outside the
Within the
district.
school.
It's
like
within
within
the
the district. Okay.
district.
Maybe this school might offer this program that
Yeah.
this school doesn't offer. So a lot of districts have moved in that direction where they've created like magnet programs or specialized programs. And so it does create, just a lot of movement. And you're not necessarily just looking at students within those boundaries to define enrollment.
Yeah, and it's about that attraction that we had talked about. But
I think that would be interesting to know. I mean, I know we have certain like our dual immersion programs that are probably attracting students, but is there also a factor of, I'll just say like, I don't want my kid at this school because it's old and that, whatever people's perception of it is there that kind of movement as well?
We do encounter permits or asks to move to a different school because they have strong opinions for some reason or another. I wouldn't say that there are themes, but I will say that, when you look at, for example, some of the newer schools, right? That's something that is cited amongst many people saying, oh, this facility looks really, really nice, and that creates a perception.
Yeah.
So it is important to have that parity and to make sure that, going back to what you said originally, some schools are more welcoming than others. And it's not the person that's sitting as you
Right,
open the
no.
door, it's the way, it's the facility, the way it's
Yeah.
structured. So there are things that we can do immediately to improve on that.
Yeah.
And so just kind of going back to, I think, we're starting to think about how we use some of our after-school funding to create opportunities for kids. If we create 14 opportunities, then, or at 14 different sites, then it limits our ability to bring in variety. And so we are looking at ways to diversify programs within the district, but we're also being very mindful about how do we use transportation and how do we connect students to resources and opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think it's a conversation for us to have. And then I do know that some of our schools, I don't want to say unintentionally, but there is some intentionality behind it, right? The dual language and some programs also are creating a little bit of a discussion within our community. And so there are, families that are, choosing to attend those schools. It's a conversation to continue to have as a board, especially as we think about strategic planning and opportunities that we want to have for kids in the next 5 years. It's definitely something that we should talk about.
Great. Any other comments on criteria?
Yeah, I'll chime in. Something I was thinking about is, just making sure there's certain key elements that are seen across all schools, right? And I'll just kind of just give examples of, and not specifically this district, but community noticings, like even your marquee. It's like, why is it that this school has the 50-year-old marquee and that school doesn't, right? Or, wellness rooms are really big, or, are becoming more consistent across campuses. But again, you're paying attention to that school's wellness room has so much upgrades and so many resources compared to that. So just kind of prioritizing, what are those key things? And it connects to making sure our schools are inviting, and because, the front office, right? That's the first impression for a lot of families, that entrance. That's what I'm kind of noting about the marquee, the entrance. Or I've paid attention to, again, even for security, why is it that campus has the buzz, has that safety in place, but this front office doesn't,
Right. Yeah, that's great. And the grant is going to also allow you to, I'm assuming, do some evaluations and reflections on successes. So I'm guessing you'll get some feedback with regard to the community school piece. Those are all good points. Any other thoughts? Okay, we'll move on. So this is reflective of what we are proposed today. I do like that idea of seeing a chart prior to the master plan work. So wanted to break this down a little bit further, because those are big numbers when you start to look at, dollars beyond what you can fund. So we broke this down as if, let's just say all schools get the same, about 158 or 159 million. And this is the category under full modernization. And so trying to give you a better understanding of those different categories from building envelope, and so how do you protect and maintain the exterior of the building? That's the roof, the doors, and windows. How do you improve the interiors, which is all the finishes and needed to make it a bright, new, modern look. Interior infrastructure, many of your classrooms have sinks, and obviously your science labs do, and upgrading electrical and low voltage, and then as well as the equipment and furnishing. And I look at that number, 79.3 million, and you're like, wow, that's a lot for toilet accessories. No, it's actually casework is really expensive. And so there's another approach that you may think that if we're gonna spend money on furniture, perhaps we fit out the bulk of the classrooms, but at a later date save funds for when the built-in furniture gets removed, that you have furniture, mobile furniture that would act as storage and so forth. So there's maybe a different way to look at that 79 million, maybe looking at it holistically with the opportunities with new furniture. So that's kind of one perspective if the focus was just on the full modernization. The next slide is, what if we looked at programs? And this is again across the district. Now there might be renovating learning centers at all the campuses at almost 16 million. In this case, we're showing there's places, different campuses where we're proposing new NPRs and kitchens, and that's at 33 million. So not all schools, it impacts all schools, all of this, but not all schools get new NPRs and kitchens. Renovating or creating a new library. So that was one thing that was wonderfully done in 2000. There was a fourth thought of we can do a new library as well in our classroom buildings. So that was pretty cool. But then again, other sites don't have that. New play structures at 11 million, and thinking of the services that you provide for all students' needs, thinking of Thompson as an important program, and that it wasn't part of the modernization when Durfee did. So is there an opportunity to bring that into this next thought in terms of prioritization? So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to ask another question. Are there specific facilities or upgrades that you believe will have the most positive impact on our students? I heard a lot about classrooms, because obviously they're in those spaces a lot of the time, so I think that's kind of a given.
The favorite part of most kids' days is recess, so.
I think
Although it wasn't on the first thing I thought of when I saw that here, I thought, oh, it's pretty important to the kids.
Yes.
I was thinking about, like, again, pointing out to like the wellness rooms, right? Or I've been to a school that had a STEM room, right? So just kind of those unique things, or, and again, there are things that we want to make sure that like all our schools have, but it is important that, schools have that identity to say, hey, you know what, like we have a like cinematography, right, or film, and so then we have like a room dedicated to just making sure too that we're also personalizing those special spaces at the school site that like we have the special cinematography film room or the STEM room, and so those are kind of things that come to mind.
Yeah, I really like the recess part. We're working with Anaheim Elementary right now and revising one of their play yards. It's all asphalt. And I will send you the information when it's done. It'll be done at the end of the summer, but it's going to be nature and landscape and new grass and shade and a new play structure that fits the size of the kids. It's actually the size was like a pre-K size, so yeah, it didn't work. But But when you think about recess, it's about a diversity, just like you diversify sporting students in their educational growth and wellness, same thing on the outdoor spaces. There's a diversity of needs for introverts, extroverts, different types of activities. Our play yards become sort of uniform and not necessarily catering, I think, to the students.
Yeah, and I would just say, I don't know if it's anything specific, but I mean, further emphasizing, I think, socializing aspects for students, because I know that's something that has changed since
With
the
tech,
pandemic and
yeah.
everything, and tech and all of that. So creating spaces that are fun and engaging that don't have that aspect.
That require creativity,
Right.
but it's still fun.
No, you're right, and that's also kind of connects to what I was saying, because so many times parents are worried about bullying. And one of the first things we say is, by the way, we have another option where we have games that are hosted in the wellness room, or there's opportunities for your child to go to the library, just reminding parents and students that there's other spaces that you can access to socialize and because you have those introverts that maybe don't want to be outside and running around, but it's like, but I would like to go play a game in the wellness room or in the library.
Yeah, and I love that fact that some people want to be in that space, but not really in it. So there's that ability to observe and be part of it. So, and unfortunately, a sea of asphalt doesn't really support that. So, anyway, we sort of took a stab at like reshuffling the deck in terms of that overall cost. So you can kind of see it's manageable. But it does require these conversations, is there an interest in doing across the board? And you had talked about age of like, when was the last modernization and so forth. So these are important discussions for you guys.
And I'll just, Mrs. Kobian had mentioned the multipurpose rooms and the places where the students are doing musical theater. And some of them are very small, they can't hold all the kids at lunch. And or, you try to invite parents to come in and it's standing room only,
Yeah.
for, maybe a few shows in a row or something. So, so I wouldn't want to ignore that one on the list.
Right.
In answer to your question.
Great.
And I'm wondering if there's maybe an opportunity to help improve these recreational spaces with pairing up with the city. I'm coming from the planning side. I was in the planning commission for several years. Our city is desperately park poor. We are horrendously park poor, especially for LA County. And we have these great open spaces spread out throughout the community, but they're gated off on the off hours. And these are our schools.
Yeah.
In my experience, I've helped recently kind of reopen one of the spaces, and every night it was full. Families were coming out. They were using the play spaces. They were using the basketball courts while other things were going on in the fields. Music, entertainment, people, like it wasn't there because it was shut down because of COVID. And then we reopened it, and that community came out, and
Right.
community from throughout the city came out. And they were very happy to be there. So there's these opportunities to help reintegrate these sites and make it more part of the community rather than this fenced off, gated off island that once the sun sets or even before the sun sets, it's closed and nobody is invited, nobody can come in.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's those opportunities as well for, sure, some of the funding is going to be from the school district or priority, but then we can share some of that cost and provide an opportunity to the city to get back to that level of, okay, let's bring us up out of this desperately park poor to just a little park poor. But
And your schools are the center of communities. They are, and oftentimes they're not fully optimized, but there's real facility considerations like access to restrooms, how do you secure, is there access card readers, How do you fence off the main campus, or secure the main campus? But it all can be done, but I mean, think that's kind of that vision when you start to think about that big statement of the whole child and the needs of the community. Is it what programs are offered beyond school? Yeah, those are great.
Sorry, one more. And I think for me, in terms of, equity and equality on these programs, I think if we were going to do, we'll just say play structures. I think I would want to see everybody get the play structures, right? So not trying to do like one school at a time, but so the high school district just did new fields and football, track, and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was really helpful that they've pretty much over 2 years, they redid all of them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's helpful just in the sense of fairness, that everybody's like, okay, we're getting it next year, not like, oh, you have to wait 5 years before you get your turn for whatever it is.
And that's in the order of scale, right? So looking at 11 million, and this gentleman will tell you what you can get with the sale of a bond, and the sales typically take 2 to 3 years or 5 years. Obviously that means that whatever your bonding capacity was, now it's only this for X amount of years. And you can achieve some of those things where it's across board. So those are great, let's criteria prioritization will also be what can we do across the board. So good thoughts. All right, so we're going to move down. I did want to share with you a little bit about the educational specifications that are part of the appendix of the facility master plan. And this is imagining taking over, reconfiguring 2.5 classrooms or 3 classrooms where you have a series of offices, and this would be the leadership team at the campus, so they can share their lessons and be able to collaborate together, as well as have the care center or wellness center next door. So currently, many of the people that would be in this space are kind of distributed throughout the campus in much larger spaces they need to be. But this allows for them to come together, and conference rooms are really difficult to come by for on campuses, so being able to provide those as flex spaces as well. Additionally, I may need help to start this. This is another concept that we're proposing for the multipurpose buildings. Basically, it would be a functional space, a multifunctional space that would be used for after-school programs like sports. So it would have a high ceiling and basketball court, and it would also be used for dining, but it also can be used for performance because it has an associated stage in the right sort of orientation. Of course, restrooms and so forth. So I think go ahead, you could play it, yeah. So these are some of it's a larger facility than your typical NPR. It's about 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. But it has that ability to kind of transform. Of course, food service would be connected to it, and then the ability to have performances. So it just allows for different types of functions to occur. I think it's a slight variation of Durfee, but Durfee is a really cool space to be in. It's got nice acoustics. Acoustics are really important. All right, so we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so in summary, we heard a lot today from you, and thank you for participating in my Q&A along the way. I think this is perfect timing for you guys. Dr. Garcia talked with me before this meeting and said, we're recovering from COVID, and it really, you had a very specific focus, and that was your families and your students. And we had finished the master plan during that time and talked and got all these ideas. So I think this is a wonderful time for you guys because you'll be able to reflect with more sort of relaxed feeling, I think, and be able to see out further. So with that, that's my presentation, and we'll definitely get you the executive summary, which is the 17-page document as well.
Is it all this?
It is not.
Okay,
That is actually the site. It's quite a large document. We have a very simple 17-page executive summary. And then we have all these appendixes, and the appendixes are hundreds and hundreds of pages. It includes all the cost estimates, but we did provide you the examples of the site improvements. So a summary of the data that we received over the engagement process, the analysis we did in terms of uses, and then the proposed projects. So that's in your packet. But we have, all the cost breakdown and lots more information, so. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. Every time that you all visit, we just hear so much of your care for the kids. And it's really, really nice. I love it. Personally, I love it. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I think I know how much you love them too. The Seymour Family Center, it was so lovely to go there and see that you've integrated the green emeralds, and every time I drive by on the 605, I think there's this relationship that you guys are making within the community and the world, and it matters,
Yes, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have an hour left in our meeting. I would like to wrap things up by noon, but I think we have just enough time to get through the last two things on our agenda. So next up is our bond planning.
Yes, thank you, President Rivas. Thank you, Kim, for the informative presentation. And as we look at our identified projects and moving forward with that task, right, it's important that we discuss the financial aspects to understand our funding options, right? I do want to take a step back. I know the master plan says that there's $600 million of facility needs, right? But know that our facilities are, we keep them in good repair, right? We set aside dollars every year in our budget to make sure that we are taking care of the investment that the community has invested over the years, right? So that $600 million of needs is a big price tag, right? It's not as big as other districts in the area because we've invested quite a bit over the past 25 years, but it helps the district, the board, the leadership to really see what the needs are going into the future, right? And with us this morning is Blake Beam from KNN. He is he works with the district, right? I think since 2014, which happens to be the last time El Monte City School District had a bond on the ballot when Measure M was passed. And they've worked with us over the years to help withdraw funds from our voter authorized bond capacity. We've had a couple bond sales over the past few years. And as we look at the funding and the fiscal piece of executing the facility master plan, it does come with some challenges and risk, right? How do you implement projects and ensure parity, right, across your schools if there's $600 million of needs, if we only have maybe 5 to 10% of that funding available currently in our bond. So with us this morning, we have Blake. He will go ahead and walk the board and present some information to the board for your consideration so we can explore potential financing options and also including the possibility of a future voter-approved bond. So with that, I'll turn over to Blake to lead the discussion.
Good morning. This is exciting. I have had the opportunity of working with the district for the last decade, and while the front end of that decade there was more activity and things going on the construction front and improvements, the last half of it has been more kind of forward-looking planning and kind of waiting for the right opportunity to get to the place that you all are exploring now. And so it was a joy to sit in and listen to the strategic planning conversation, just get a nice recap of the facilities planning work that's been done. And I'll try to be to the point today because I know that it's already been a long discussion, but I just want to bring some information in terms of looking forward, funding solutions that you guys could consider with regard to addressing some of the facility needs that we just heard about. And so, I don't know if this is, maybe I'm going the wrong direction. Okay, so with that, Just to kind of kick things off, I know this district knows what school bonds are because it has a pretty robust bond program already. I think the one thing I'll emphasize is the importance of school bonds, not just within the El Monte community, but really across the state. And it has become the primary tool for which school districts can fund larger capital projects. There's really, some people believe that there's just money sitting out there that school districts can apply for or find to do these projects. And unfortunately, there may be small pockets, but it's very limited. And when you're talking about a 10-plus year, planning horizon for transforming school facilities within the district and focusing on equity and focusing on modernization, a school bond is really a necessity. And so what, that will allow the district to do is to access funds on the front end and make improvements within the school sites, for community members now and in the future. So it's really generational improvements that you all are considering. And so with that, these school bonds will, once they're sold, each series of bonds has a 30-year horizon for repayment. And so if there's multiple series, you could be talking about a 40-plus year overall repayment. And so it just kind of further emphasizes the importance of, the project scopes and kind of what you all will be addressing with a future bond. I'll talk about a capacity for a future bond, and really when I say capacity, there's certain parameters that, will allow the district to get to a certain dollar amount, but it's not an endless, opportunity to kind of pick a dollar amount just to align it with exactly what the district needs. Some of those parameters include a tax rate maximum. So for a non-unified school district in California, that maximum is $30 per 100,000 of assessed value. Most of the district's prior bond measures are aligned with that upper end tax rate amount. Additionally, there's an overall debt limit capacity. Now, because of the robust work that the district has done earlier in the 2000s era, that 1.25% for a non-unified district, El Monte City School District has already, exceeded that amount. So the process that we've been through in the past and that we would likely go through again is working with the State Board of Education to allow for a period of time for which the district can exceed that 1.25%. And so there's a bunch of analytics that we would provide to them along with a resolution request, and then they would consider that. I've been involved with it with school districts throughout the state probably a dozen times. I've yet to see the State Board of Education deny a waiver request because they understand with voter approval of a bond and commitment by a school district to do these priority projects, it's really at the local level that they want to, I think, defer some of these things. And then, as I think each of you are aware, with a new bond measure, just kind of reinforcing the accountability requirements that come along with that in terms of Citizens Bond Oversight Committee to approve projects. There's coordination with the county to levy a tax rate that's going to be sufficient to pay these bonds back. Really all things that are already in place for the prior measures, Measure M, KC, J, which all still have monies remaining. And so on the next slide, I just wanted to touch on kind of where we're at without even looking at a new bond, because there are some dollars that still remain from those prior measures. So really, while it's been 10 years since the district has asked voters for a bond, prior to that, there were 4 bond measures that were passed, all within 15 years. The older 99 measure has all been sold, but the 2004 Measure J, 08 KC, and 2014 Measure M are all at the tail end, each of which have monies left, but there is a lot of constraint there in terms of staying within the tax rates that voters approved for each of those measures. And so as the district's value within the tax base has grown over time, KNN has worked closely with district staff to find opportunities to access those dollars, but it's just in small chunks. And when you're talking about a facilities master plan of 600 million, it's not realistic to rely on these older measures for future project needs. And so I think the punchline of my presentation is what can a new bond generate based on some of the parameters and constraints that I had mentioned previously. And so at the top, there's the table. And so at the upper end, tax rate of $30 per 100,000, we're talking about a $105 million bond measure. That $105 million coupled with, the nearly $45 million that's left, puts you at about $150 million just from bonds alone. I do think that through the issuance or accessibility timeline for a new bond, I think that those older bonds would find opportunities to clear out those remaining funds. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it, is kind of a cumulative bond amount with a new bond measure and accessing the remaining, 45 million or so from the older bonds. These scenarios, because we do look at kind of incrementally just some of the lower tax rates, just in case, there's consideration for that. Having heard the $600 million number, I would think that maybe not, but I'll leave that to the board to weigh in on. Each one of these scenarios are run using a baseline set of assumptions, and they do largely match how we've been modeling the district's existing bond measures and prior debt issuance. So we have to assume, in order to structure the debt and stay at the tax rate, we have to assume a certain AV growth or assessed valuation growth assumption. We've used 4 historically, and we're using 4% per year for this future, for a future bond measure. Just because it aligns very well with the district's historic growth rate. The last 20 years, the average growth rate has been just over 5%. So using 4, it kind of lands us on a more conservative side, which will help as the actual numbers come in, and we want to stay under that tax rate commitment, that pledge that would be made to voters. So that's why we kind of land on the more conservative side. All of the bonds are not accessed at once. I think I heard Kim mention kind of or note that in her presentation previously. One is a cash flow. That's kind of the main driver, is what can the district accomplish within a 2 to 3 year planning window without totally disrupting its programmatic, efforts, to serve students. So we don't anticipate $105 million worth of bonds being sold all at once. It would likely be sold usually in equal installments every 2 to 3 years, and that's kind of what I represent on the page I'll show you here next. Each of the series of bonds will be paid off within a 30-year planning horizon or repayment timeframe. We're focused on just current interest bonds, meaning bonds that will be paying principal and interest each year. There are some financing tools that school districts have used in the past. I believe El Monte has used them in the past, which are capital appreciation bonds. It's a deferred payment. It's usually a bit more costly and usually are introduced when there are assessed value constraints or tax rate constraints in a time where you absolutely want to finish a project or start a project that's a huge priority. For planning purposes, we're not really accounting for those bonds being included in a new bond measure. It would just be a more traditional, more cost-effective tool, which is current interest bonds. And then I had mentioned previously, this future bond measure would require a waiver for the overall debt limit. So this is just kind of a preliminary snapshot at what a new measure could look like in terms of aligning with accessing project funding and moving forward with projects. There's definitely flexibility in terms of these numbers, though. So it would take more coordination with district staff and the board to figure out what the projects are, what the cash flow needs are, and we could kind of move these numbers around. I think where we start to lose flexibility is that total dollar amount. I think that in talking with Jose leading up to this discussion, there was a goal to kind of max out, look at a max out bond scenario. And, based on my experiences working with the district and kind of in this capacity, 105 is where I'm landing at in terms of a comfortable number that won't over leverage the community or tax rate in a single bond. And then there's other details. At the bottom left, we point out what the average homeowner would be paying from pursuing a new $30 per 100,000 tax rate, and based on the current median assessed value within the district, the average homeowner would be paying about $110 more a year. Based on the older measures that are already in place, homeowners are currently, the average homeowner, I should say, is currently paying about $295 per year. So, with that, we're really talking about just over $400 per year for El Monte City Schools is what the community is currently contributing or would be contributing in a post, November 24 bond.
Quick question, do you happen to know what the high school district one is also? Because that's like our same community, because
I have a slide, but we focused on the elementaries as kind of a more appropriate kind of comparison, just because of the different facilities, different cost of those facilities. I can certainly provide that as a follow-up.
I think I'm just wondering, because in perspective, two homeowners were saying, okay, we're adding this for our district, but already knowing that there has been an additional, it was last year, a couple of years ago, right? The high school district also has their, their tax.
So we have presented that information, or perhaps we just reviewed it internally over the years, and we can bring that information back to the board. From what I recall and looking at that information, El Monte at one time, right, because we had a robust program, we were a district that had, if we were to run this slide a decade ago, we would have been all the way over to the left with the highest dollar per tax rate, because it was reflective of the fact that there was 4 bonds, strong community support, we issued out the debt was being paid off. I would say between 2018 and 2024, we've been moving down that list, right? Because we haven't been issuing more bond funds, we've just been paying off the debt, right? Recently, in the past 12, 24 months, we've issued out more bond funds because we know we're wrapping up the master plan, right? And our thought was we will access the cash. We've been able to access about $30 million of bond funds at a very low interest rate before the interest rates took off. And so that was in the best interest of the voters and the district. As we've come down that list, the high school has passed a bond. I believe 2018, if I recall correctly, is when they passed their most recent bond. And so from the El Monte homeowner or taxpayer's perspective, they may have not seen any relief because while our tax rate has decreased considerably over the past 6 years, they've increased the, financial pressure or burden or support with the bonds that they've been pulling out. And so overall, but we can bring that information back, but that's my recollection of the information, right? We've pulled back a bit, and as we've pulled back, the high school district has stepped in with their bonds that they've sold. And so overall, the average homeowner on their property tax bill, I don't think has seen much of a difference because we provided some relief, but then that's been replaced with some of the bonds that the high school has passed.
I do want to position that question because I think it's a good question. And I think it is appropriate to look at, the community and look at all of, just because there's also Rio Hondo College.
Right, yeah, true, yeah.
And I think it's important to see what the community is really supporting. I will say that Rio Hondo College is also starting to prepare for a future bond, and they're starting to gather community input. And the high school district is also preparing for a future bond. And so that's also part of this conversation, is that there's an opportunity now, because this chart looks a certain way, that could change, 4 years from now, when there's other bonds on a ballot.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. When did the homeowners finish up paying Measure K? If you happen to remember, what year?
I have that information. Measure K, so all of that debt that was originally issued has been refinanced for cost savings, interest cost savings. And so the remaining term, it looks like it goes out to 2030.
Oh, okay, so it's still going,
It is still going.
but almost done.
It's almost done.
Yeah, wow,
That
okay.
was for K.
Measure K, uh-huh.
2030 and 1999.
Wow.
It sounded like so
Well,
futuristic,
yeah,
and yet
that's-
it's around the corner.
right. But it is the 30-year plan, right? And then one other thing that I noticed that on your slide that is a little bit relevant to the conversation that I didn't realize before was that unified school districts can go up to 60 per assessed value, and,
Oh,
the
yeah.
high school district and us, we can do 30-30, right? So there's that as well, right? Kind of built-in buffer for the homeowners, so.
Yes, yeah, that's, and the specific tax rate, the $30, I think is, the idea of that legislature, or legislation is intended to make sure that school districts are staying within what was considered reasonable at the time it was put forth. But as you go out for new bonds, each time, you have to scope it accordingly, and the voters, the intent is for voters to be supportive and excited about, what's coming, and be willing to, add more dollars onto their property taxes.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question and then a comment. So specifically on this slide, just for clarify, right, you're estimating, the estimate cost of average to district homeowner is, say, $294 per year. Is that in addition to, or is that would be like current plus the potential bond?
So that is the current,
That is the current right now.
that's right.
Okay, so then if there is a new bond, it would be in addition to that.
That's right. And
Okay.
so I think that calculation was just over 100. So the cumulative, if a new bond was pursued, would be, I think it's $405 per year for the average homeowner.
Thank you. And then a comment, so from just coming back from NALO, one of the sessions was the Latino vote for 2024, and just some analysis on what nationwide, right? So they gave information about like how there's been significant growth in Latinos in different states. But one of the ones that I took a screenshot that I wanted to kind of share is that what they're finding is that for Latinos, the top concern for the 2024 election is inflation. So you're looking at over half of Latinos say inflation is the issue they're finding most worrying. Crime and gun violence is at 34%, and actually immigration is lower at 28%. So just something to keep in mind that I know historically our community has been really been supportive and have passed bonds, but it's just something to take in consideration, right? That we may see something a little bit different if we were to move forward with this, just based off of inflation that's been going on. It has been significantly increasing rapidly in the last few years.
And to that point, it's actually it's a double-edged sword, right? Because with inflation comes inflation to facility improvements, right? And so you saw the number that our architects put forward, right? I believe it was $400 million. What that was the actual need, right? But when escalated for inflation for when these projects were to be implemented, it increased it by 50% up to $600 million of total needs. And the district over the years has managed its finances well, and had the foresight to move quickly, right, between 1999 and 2014, right? The community was supportive with the support of 4 bond measures, whereas not all districts did that, and you see the end result, right, of the conditions of our current facilities. And there are neighboring districts around us that didn't move as quickly and didn't have that vision, at least as it pertained to the area facilities. And they've moved recently in the past few years with bond measures. And the bond measures that they put forward is going to, it's a drop in the bucket in relation to the total needs that are there. So it's, you know, it's even on the topic of assessed valuation, right? We look at when the assessed valuation increases, that's good for our bond. But also we know that that increases the cost of living potentially for new families trying to move in to our community or stay living in our community. So it has an impact on both sides too with our enrollment. And so it, there's always, you know, the cause and effect piece of it, right? So things for us to consider as we move forward with the next steps.
Are you waiting for more questions?
Yeah, if you guys have any, I'm happy to answer them.
Any other?
I think just to answer your question, I looked it up, and the high school's at the 30 for every 100,000 as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we'll bring back some information that just talks about all of, you know, what all of their bond program looks like and what that, that dollar amount looks like for the community, and bring back information. I think it's important to add Rio Hondo to the conversation, and definitely, you know, our projections as well.
Yeah, and then some of our neighborhoods had PCC last time.
Right.
So
Right?
that's another part of it.
Well, thank you, Blake, for the presentation. And you know, I think it's clear that we have a shared commitment with with improving our district facilities and providing the best educational environment for the kids here in El Monte. And I also believe it's quite evident today, given the presentations that we have, starting with the strategic plan, then followed up with our master plan and our bond financing, that the pursuing a general obligation bond, perhaps in November of 2024, is the most viable solution for us to implement and execute the projects identified in our master plan. And so to move forward effectively, if we want to move forward and bring that master plan, the projects to life and implement them and go in that direction, I would propose the next course of action. The recommendation would be at our upcoming board meeting scheduled on August 5th to specifically call for, put forward a resolution for the board to consider calling for an election in November. So when we look at the timeline and the opportunities that are presented in front of us, there is certain timelines that districts must comply with if they are to put a bond measure on the ballot in November. And in that time frame, I believe August 8th or August 9th is the final date for the board to take action. We do have an opportunity. We've done the work up front with identifying the needs in our facility master plan. And so with that, I would recommend that the board entertain discussion at this point to, based off staff's recommendation, to put forward a resolution for the board to consider and vote on at the August 5th board meeting, calling for a general obligation bond election at the upcoming November 5th, 2024 election.
Thank you very much. It's exciting to be at this point considering this. You know, there's always, you always hesitate, right, to ask something of the homeowners, but what we've seen the impact that these programs have had on our schools, and we've also seen the real need that remains in the schools. And one thing, because I've seen a few of these presentations before, one thing that I do remember is you were talking about how the costs increase really rapidly, right? The cost of construction over the years. And so I remember looking at Measure K, early Measure K buildings, right? And then just how the costs changed at these different school sites over the years. So, yeah, just to kind of reiterate your point that it just only gets more expensive, right? And, but the need remains. So, yeah, thank you very much for the presentation and for the entire cabinet for bringing all of this together all in one day for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Blake. Thank you for being here and for being such a wonderful partner for so many years.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, guys, we have 30 minutes to go, so can we make it? If you need a standing stretching break, we can do that, but we should forge ahead and try to finish up and wrap things up by noon. So next on our agenda is the 24-25 governance calendar, along with our board meeting presentation calendar.
So this is the governance calendar template that we've used for several years now, and it really helps us to just kind of consider all of the things that happen in the school year so that we can look ahead, and there's an opportunity for the board to give comment on things that we want to move. You know, some things have to stay. They're requirements that we have as a district, but it's an opportunity, again, to just see all of the functions of the district comprehensively. And so we thought we would take this opportunity to put it up there or look at it on our screens, and the board can comment on the year ahead.
I'll just say, I really like that we've filled it out so much more. I think that's really helpful. I did have a question, given our last presentation. Do we have an active bond oversight committee?
We do and we do not. It's
Okay.
been inactive. We haven't necessarily, we've been sharing information at large, but it's an opportunity for us. We need to come back together and bring back our oversight committee, and I'll turn it over to you so you
Yeah,
can talk about
and,
the work.
I believe there has been no bond expenditure activity.
Right.
But there still is a requirement for us to gather and meet every so often. This is a good opportunity over the summer to, and we've had discussions with those that have served on the committee, and I think there's an awareness on those members as well to say, I think it's time to allow others to come in, right? So we have been quite dormant the past, I would say, 5 years. This was the last bond-funded project, the facility that we're currently in. And so it's a good opportunity for us, as we're looking to pursue a bond in November, to preemptively solicit those that would like to serve on the Citizens Oversight Committee, right? So we can introduce and assemble the team and be prepared for review, because there will be expenditure activity that begins to trickle in the very near future, right? So it is a requirement. Even with Measure, I believe it was K, or Measure J from 1999, if you have no expenditure activity until those bonds are fully paid off, right? So 2030 or whatever the year was that they put out there, there would still be a requirement to meet on that. So, but we're in the process of developing an application process similar to what we did when we had a vacancy with our board. We'll do something like that, push it out, and bring some new stakeholders onto that committee.
Yeah, because I think there's part of a requirement to present to the board as well. So I think that would be, to incorporate into this calendar,
Oh, good point.
having that check-in.
I have a quick question. For our agenda, I know we've had the flag salute followed by school presentation. Is that something we need to add it to our agenda just because it hasn't been reflected, right? It'll indicate flag salute and who's speaking, and it kind of goes into a presentation. And so maybe
That's
it has
a good
it.
idea.
Okay, you're like, yeah, just because then that will give us notification like, okay, flag salute, but we're also having a presentation from Columbia, right? And that can just be part of that agenda.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because we just started implementing this year was something that kind of caught my attention.
Yeah, we usually have the name of the student and the school that they're from, but we don't explicitly say they're also doing a presentation. So,
Correct,
good point.
yes, yeah.
You know, and I will say that it started off as just giving the student the opportunity to say something, and it turned into a presentation,
Yeah,
which I think
turned
is
into it,
great.
yes.
But I do like the idea of spelling it out.
You did on the other document highlight everyone
Right.
having school presentations.
Yeah, we did include that in
And the last one, maybe?
the items of interest, with the idea that it was something that was really, just really well accepted, and people are looking forward to it. Our schools are looking forward to it. So for the board meeting presentation document, we added school presentation throughout.
Perfect.
The other one I'm wondering, with under the superintendent category, I know we have progress on goals to the board, but it's aligning with the evaluation. So I feel like there should maybe a secondary one, or,
Well, actually, thank you for acknowledging.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be redone, that whole section.
Okay.
And I think the strategic plan is the start to having the goals. The superintendent develops goals around the strategic
Yeah.
plan. And then we can now create the metrics for check-ins as well as evaluation. I'll highlight that section so that we can build it out.
And appreciate the special education presentation update. Thank you.
These aren't really directly related to governance, but we had talked about having a few, I see the last column there, or last row is district events. And there are a few, I think, a few EMETA events, so retirement dinner is there. I'm wondering if Day of the Teacher, or if there are specific ones that EMETA would be regularly inviting the board to, that, you know.
We could, and I think we would also, I think, open it up to CSEA to see if there's any events that they would like to include there, and happy to have that conversation so that we can get them all. Actually, it'd be great to have those dates calendared, so happy to bring that information into this area.
Yeah, great, thank you.
and I think on that column too, updating with the American Legion assemblies, so it,
You know, I saw that, I thought I did, I thought I removed assemblies, but perhaps I didn't.
yeah.
We're transitioning to doing the presentation at the board meeting, and so that will just reflect the board meeting.
And then also probably adding in the musical theater for the spring, or something, you know, to when that.
Well, and I'm, so so there's a
Yeah.
little hesitation, because one of the things that I know that Teresa and her team are really working on is we want to make sure that performances are offered when the school and the students are ready, and not necessarily creating windows for them. And so I think there's going to be some conversation around giving people that flexibility, but the importance of having dates in advance and having everything calendared in, super important. So I'm even hesitant to say school winter performances, because I think, you know, we just want to make sure that the choir performances, the band performance are done at a time when just people feel ready.
And you're right, we just have so many ongoing things, and so kind of just making sure our governance calendar is just really highlighting those priority events that we as board members want to priorities, that we're making an effort to attend or being aware of. Because then we have a lot of great things going on. And you're right, like even with it, we could have 100 things, but just making sure that we're really highlighting the things that are aligning with our governance calendar.
And maybe this is going to be, maybe we just kind of reflect that their student performances throughout the
Throughout
year.
the year,
And they
yeah.
those individual performances will be noted in the board calendar. We have conga kids, we have choral events.
And we have math night. I'm just saying, there's just so many
Yeah.
going on. So like I said, I'm comfortable with just
Calendar.
making sure we're highlighting those
Yeah.
very much district-wide events, like where everyone is invited, right? Like those, the back-to-school night, the breakfast, the holiday mixture, those are really district all events that all of the employees and even retirees are coming back to.
I'll have a little arrow that says student performances throughout the 12
All,
weeks.
yeah.
And actually, not that I want to move us on, but you will be invited to all the musical theater performances that are taking place, I think, that first week in July. It's really, really fun, really neat. And so, yeah, it's a 12-month operation.
Very good. Anything else?
No, like I said, I just really appreciate it, especially just like the governance piece. That's something we really focused on, making sure that that is something we're prioritizing and making sure that we're following up, like adding the January, to make sure we're reviewing our governance handbook. So that for me is really important with this governance calendar, is having that in place to make sure that we are following through with the things that we need to do annually.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks. Okay, so I think we're good to move on from the governance calendar.
Yes.
And then the board presentations calendar.
Oh, I think I was on that one first.
I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to make it a 2-year calendar, only because I think there's more things in this we want to hear, but we don't need to hear, there's only so many we can do, and, looking at how many schools we actually can fit in, so kind of showing that we're accommodating that. So anyway, I was thinking about maybe that as an option, and then more specifically, some things I would like to include. I mean, these are updates, right? These presentations?
So can I just say
Yeah,
that?
let me clarify.
A couple of things. One is, like, for example, unaudited actuals is a presentation that we give to the board. So it's done during the items of interest, because that's when we have people that are in attendance, and so it's an opportunity to really talk about these topics, with an audience. Some of these could be built into our cabinet updates. And so we would like direction from the board, because some of them, there's some items that will require just longer presentations, and other things can be just an update on how things are going, or, what we're doing. So if there is a preference, we can do that. And so our cabinet update can serve as a place to talk about things, as well as items of interest where the presentation is much longer. We're inviting staff to come in and share details, and there's an opportunity for Q&A. Cabinet update would be the 4 of us presenting, giving you an overview of something, perhaps having some answering questions based on previous discussions, and then we would move on to the next topic.
Yeah, because I'm thinking there's just some topics, so I guess it would just depend on what makes sense. So I'm thinking like school safety, and, an update on what the things that we're doing in that area. I think I know we have LCAP and district data, but I think specifically around math, because I know that's one of the target areas. So I don't know if that warrants a whole separate presentation. So I would leave that up to you and the president to decide. But I think there's some topics like that some more in-depth information for us on the things the district is doing. So other ones would be like the trips the students are doing. And I really liked having the students come in and talk about it. So that, it could just be part of your update, but that enriched it a little bit.
I agree.
Additionally, I know we have the summer programs, but also, so the musical theater, the arts, the things that we're doing there as well.
So is your best conception of it to have it laid out over 2 years, or to have
Well,
like
I
a
guess
list
maybe
of?
it depends on what this list looks like, because you don't want to overload it at a certain meeting. And so I don't know if it makes sense to say, okay, well, this year we had an update on the DC trip, say, but maybe it doesn't come back again just because we have other things. Or school safety, is that something we should get an update on every year? There was something else, community schools, right? What we're doing related to community schools. I think just sort of having that sense of, at some point during the year or over a 2-year span, we should kind of be seeing every aspect of the district, presented either as a part of a cabinet update or as a specific presentation. for ourselves, and just so there's that overview for the community.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So it's more
I wrote it all
expansive, but
down.
also more like, sort of specifically, and that way too, if we identify, okay, in March, it's going to be this, that staff knows like, okay, this is what we're preparing for.
So that's what I like about this, is this idea
Yeah.
that, our staff can plan ahead. This is what I'm thinking is, if you give us an opportunity, we can come up with a plan where we identify updates, kind of along the lines of, all things EMCSD rotated throughout the year, and differentiate between what would be appropriate for a cabinet update, that's maybe 1 to 2 slides, versus a presentation.
Yeah.
That would require just a little
report
bit
of some
more information, and we'd like to have, the team here present about the work. And then happy to take into consideration school safety, math, trips, student presentations,
Jeff
community
Seymour Center,
schools, Jeff
yeah.
Seymour Center, special ed, dual language has been mentioned.
Yeah, and then keep that list and keep record of when.
Right, so then that way we can, again, we
Cycle
don't have to
back.
revisit everything every year, but, having it, so we continue to.
I like that. Yeah, we can figure out a way to record it all.
We can bring something back August 5th, and I'll work with Mrs. Rivas and Cabinet between now and then. Or possibly the 19th.
Yeah, good. Any other questions or comments?
No, I just know with our board meeting presentations, in a good way, we just have had so many new things being launched, right? With, DC, and we're I don't want to say the word forever, but we're constantly evolving, which is great, right? And so that does kind of like, I know we have like, this is like a potential, this is our draft of what we're thinking of, but then knowing that we're all very open to changes and saying, you know what, something new has come up that we want to kind of highlight. And then that's what we have at the end, our discussion items are like, here are some things that we're finding that we really want a little bit more information on. So I'm comfortable with having a framework of just making sure that, hey, within 2 years, we want to make sure that we're hitting, or like within 2 years, we're making sure that we highlight every school, so they can see like, hey, you didn't get highlighted this year, but you're going to get your highlight next year, and the flag salute, and then making sure that there are some things that we always have to do, like with the interim and the budget. Yeah, so I'm just like, I'm fine with the framework, but just knowing that we know that. And that's what's great about our cabinet report, so then that allows that flexibility to give some quick updates about what's going on, and doesn't need necessarily just a really focused presentation on it.
I like that.
Okay, very good. Now, we don't need to approve any of this, right? Okay, very good. Then we'll bring back the board meeting presentations at the next meeting. Okay, anything else before we close the meeting? Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for being here bright and early Saturday morning. I adjourn the meeting at 11:46.
There is lunch outside.